Okay, guys, so let's begin with another roundtable. I'm here with two of my colleagues and friends that I admire a lot. It's Professor Shirley Maya and Professor Fernanda Falcoski. I'm a black man. I have curly hair. I'm wearing black t-shirt and the logo of UMASP in white. So let us begin. The first one is Fernanda Falcoski about to work with deafblind people, and then Professor Shirley Maya, that is here as the the main director of AFIMISA, and works with multisensory disability. So in this table we will talk about multiple disabilities. Professor Fernanda is doctor in special education in UFSCar and master in education in UX. And she's also the member of the accessible movement. So Fernanda will start talking, and then Professor Shirley, his doctorate was in Mackenzie, and she will bring some news. Shirley always have news about the deaf blind area and the multisensory disability. Fernanda, you can begin. Thanks, Joan. So, just describe myself. I am a white female. I have curly hair too. They are now uh, in a ponytail. I'm wearing a blouse and black blouse. So my speech, the title is The Possibilities of Mediation, Pedagogic Mediation in the Alphabetization of Deaf-Blind Students. Sometimes I'm looking to the side. It's not like I'm not interested in you guys, but I'm looking to my presentation. This presentation have a white background and some details in pink, green, and blue. There's also the logo of our group, GPIX. So the first question that I would like us to reflect about is the meaning of literacy or alphabetization here in Brazil especially. What comes to mind when you think about alphabetization? Maybe if you guys presentially would like to say something or a word that is associated with this concept. Just one word. What does it mean? What does it mean, alphabetization or literacy? If you guys are at home, maybe I won't be able to to see, but teaching, okay, teaching is the first word. Reading, starting years. One more. Read, write. Read, write, reflect. Okay. So, we'll talk a lot about that. So, anyone here, do you guys have already alphabetized a kid or participated in this process of literacy? Yes? Okay. I use the term child, but we can think about teenagers or adults or elder people. And someone with disability, yes? Okay, some of you. Okay. Well, before we talk about alphabetization specifically, we have to talk about other things. We have to talk about communication because we can't think about alphabetization without thinking about communication. This material here that I brought, it has a lot of written stuff. I'm not reading everything there, but at some point, I don't recall if it's in the beginning or the end of the presentation, there is my email, and if you want, you can send me an email and I will share with you this presentation and other materials, okay? So let us think real quickly about the communication. Can you go ahead, please? Yes. Okay, so in this slide, there is two different maps. So right now, I'm talking about receptive communication. When we think about communication, there are two moments. The receptive communication, that's when the person receives the communication in different ways and it comprehends it. But we will also have the expressive communication, which is when you pass along this information and it is
Essas
comprehended
duas formas de
expressively. Those two, they will. There's a way to split this in two parts: the symbolic communication and the basic. Uh, Maybe the letters are a little bit. In those two boards, I try to make. Just a moment, please. I'm adjusting some settings, audio settings here. Okay, what about now? It worked. Okay. I'm sorry about that. There was some echo happening. Another was reading what was in that slide. Um, you said there are two branches. The receptive communication when you receive information and express it. That's when you use the communication to express yourself. And based on Wilson, Watanabe, Trimmel, uh, there are different ways of expressing that. In the expressive communication, the first moment we use, for instance, corporal expression. I use one kind of, I use one color specifically to mark things that are for the present time, the communicational situation where the kid is right now. The blue is for its future, and red is planning for a new year. So it's a way of planning ahead of time. How does the literacy process of this kid will happen? Again, based on Watanabe, 2017, a master research dissertation. And I always work with these two kinds of communication, the reception and the expression. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm trying to do that real quickly to show all the theoretical framework. So afterwards, we can discuss the alphabetization and all the different data that I used in the research. Well, after we talk a lot about communication and development, then we can talk about alphabetization, literacy in English. Alphabetization is a branch that specifically to Brazil we use a lot. Alphabetization and there are two types of division. Uh, so I bring a tiny excerpt of what it is alphabetization, so we can start thinking about that. That is a little bit of what everyone here commented. Some of the words they said before. It's about teaching. It's about reading. It's about writing. The system here in Brazil, we use Portuguese, other countries use other kind of system. So thinking about alphabetization is also thinking about language. But there is another idea, which we usually call in English literacy. I'm still talking generically and not specifically to the deaf blindness, but I bring this idea, this literacy idea, and how do I put the reading part of the word of a language in social experience? So when we talk about alphabetization and literacy and fuse them, I think the most recognized, remarkable researcher about this is Magda Soares, a Brazilian educator. So I bring a proposal in my PhD thesis when we organize all the materials so we can think about alphabetization specifically of kids and congenital deafblind people too. So we can start thinking. If you guys go to my thesis, you'll find all this in a very detailed way. Right now, I'm not able to do that, but afterwards, going forward, in my thesis, you can see a list. Uh, it's like a checklist of all the things that a kid have to do in each step of the way. Because when we get a new kid, we sometimes forget that this kid has a history and needs to get from where it started and go ahead. Usually, when we get this kid, we start from scratch. We go from for stage zero and start from there. But actually, we don't have to. There is a way, and that's what I'm proposing here, is to divide this literacy process in four different moments and check in which moment, which step the kid is in, and start from there, not start first from scratch. So I'm calling those steps of pre-alphabetization, pre-emergent alphabetization, emergent alphabetization, and alphabetization. Those are the four steps that I'm calling here. It should work for uh, sign language, for sign writing. It should work for Braille. It should work for any oral language, and it's understood for us that it's common sense for us that the kid will always be in one of those steps, and the kid is never out of this alphabetization process. In pre-alphabetization, but it's not correct to be saying that, well, this kid is not in the alphabetization path. So we understand that pre-alphabetization is conceived as an extension of the communication. So we need to think of the communication ahead and then the alphabetization process. But all this communication development is inside the pre-alphabetization. In my thesis, I show some strategies and how can you apply that practically. So we try to make a systematization or a scheme, a framework of how we can understand and categorize the kids inside this framework and how to work that practically. In my thesis, there's a lot of examples and didactical choices, possibilities that I put there. So it's understood that you only get in some step, in some grade of this, if you've done the previous step. And the next one after pre-alphabetization is the pre-emergent alphabetization. That's when the first skills are starting to emerge. And after all this starting skills, We have the third step, which is the emergent categorization. Maybe it's a little hard to understand right now, but I have only 20 minutes, so I can't show anything in detail. I'm just mentioning real quickly, so you can just have an idea. Oh, if you guys are on YouTube, there is the title of the thesis. You can just type the title or my name, and you can access it uh, for free online. So we get to the lesson, the last step of the way, which is optimization. And that's when the reading and writing skills are fully developed.
So when I'm talking about Portuguese, thinking about Braille, tactile, sign right, tactile. So we have to do research, and we've been trying to think about that and do research on the topic, and we were going to think about possibilities. In the next slide, I'm showing 4 pictures. I'm not going to describe uh, in details because it would go, all my time would be dedicated to that. But this is an example of an accessible book. So we are talking about accessible um, materials. We are talking about literature. So this book was created by me. I have written the story, and it's so used with haptic, tactile materials. So it's not a representation; it's the material itself. So when I talk about the tree, I have the shell of the tree. So instead of only representing the object, I put the object inside the book. And I have the cover of the book with the main characters. In this case, they are 2 kids. No, they're 2 dolls. A boy kid, and they're 3D, and you can unattach them from the book because you can carry them along the pages and write with the pages. And the elements all over the book in a small in a small box. You cannot see the box here, but um, so I showed um, what is the tree, and I put the piece of the tree, and I represent and I explain them. So for me, visually, if I have a drawing, for example, um, I make a piece of that.
For the people interested in this material, they can find me on social media, and there's a video showing the whole book. You can go there and check. Another suggestion is the history box and the alphabetization kit. It's it's sometimes bad for us to want to talk as a teacher, and we don't have time for all that. The idea of the history box is to bring the props, just like we do with early years. We bring the elements of the story and get students involved. We talk about kids, but we are talking also about teenagers and adults. I just won't bring Red Riding Hood, but bring a story according to the age. I can't just ignore that just because I can't think of their alphabetization. So we have to think about not treating adults like kids. it's not that it's not fun, but oftentimes it's not appropriate. In the box, we can find the book, the props. I do have to think who my students are so that the props I bring can make sense. I'm sorry, there's just a word there that doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. So disregard the last word there, commuter. I also bring some suggestions for this reading, some books that I have produced or with other professionals. 3 of them, Professor Shirley, that treats about deaf blindness. The first one is the result of my master's degree. It is from my thesis. There's another one with Professor Shirley, but also there's one about literacy, but it's not limited to deaf blindness. We can also think of wide range and think about my proposal. Here are the reference. If you want to learn more about that, on this slide, you can see my address. Sorry. Thanks. Thanks, Fernanda. The time was excellent. At the end, we're gonna have some time for questions. For those online, you can also leave the questions. Now, Professor Shirley, just a second as they prepare the presentation. Well, first of all, thank everybody. Thanks for the invitation. Take part in this panel. I'm a short woman. I'm using accessories, my glasses. I was first professor of deaf people. So I have the scarf and also some bracelets to make signal. Some others use just the ribbon. Our panel was multisensory deficiency, alphabetization, and pedagogical mediation. And I thought a lot about what to bring. I decided to bring some other points on how to reach these people. So I thought about the terminology. When we talk about multisensory deficiency, this term is not used in Brazil. This is the term that they bring to deaf blind, who also has got some other multisensory disorder. Canada uses some other terms. Portugal uses other terms. So for Canada, they use blind deaf plus Portugal multisensory deficiency, but we also see sensorial dual deficiency. Now, in Brazil, we have the term surdo-cegueira, with deaf blindness, where we had the participation of the families, of the people showing deaf blindness, and to decide on the term. We also use sensorial multiple deficiency, or MDVI, that is the international denomination for the people with visual deficiency, but also other deficiencies. What's the signal of multiple deficiency, disability? So if we start to analyze, we notice that people has got several aspects. Maybe DMU is the term used. Otherwise, we're going to use several signals. So let's put them together as DMU. So as Fernanda brings the alphabetization, I'd like to bring the touch. The touch in our group, as we discuss and study, it's the importance of this touch that we have to bring. We have to think about the importance of this touch as multisensory fact. How are people going to have this knowledge of the world? So we have to bring these sensory questions. And that's something that Nicholas mentions, the haptic sense. So we have to think about the sensitivity of the people and how touch is that. We have to think about tactile modality. When we think about Brazilian sign language with touch, we have to think about not simply transforming, but we have to think about something that we have to start thinking and studying, that it involves since the moment the baby is still in a womb, because the child is going to receive all these aspects in their formation. So we have to think in terms of nervous system and receptors. When we think about tactile modality, we must think about first the touch. So as Fernanda brought, if the kid doesn't know about touch, we can think of the other points. Touch is where the body is involved, and it's the process in which, from very early age, we see the communication happening, and that we're going to carry for the whole life. So we have like body tactile communication. I've been studying hard about this, the elements of individual expression. Think about how the child starts just with the natural expressions and how we're going to take part in that. what is the moment to start introducing the tactile body communication. I
So if we are thinking about the rare disease, the degenerative disease, we have to think on how um, this also affects the whole process. This is very important. So at the clinic, I'm working with a man. He was hit by a car, and he has lost half of his brain. Now we are studying. There's a neuroscientist uh, applying a Korean technology to give a stimuli to his brain and to work on the plasticity of his brain. So I told him we have to start thinking um, what is the sight aspect, because I think he has a visual disability from the cortex, uh, influence from the brain. So I said we could start writing on his skin to show him who we are, what we're doing. And his father was with him, and his father wrote on his chest, papai, which is the word for dad in Portuguese. He is here, and he responded. He had a body reaction. So I wrote a song with Laura so we could see the cortex blindness to see how he would respond. So we presented the light and we also used musical therapy with a professional that looks at that, and we also used another instrument that we loved before, which is the lyre, and we are stimulating all his perception and his senses, his sensory aspect. He used to live in the US, but his memories were in English. So I told Laura, who works with him, he had a completely different reaction. Um, so the haptic aspect, the tactile aspect, makes us think about the whole life of the person. We still don't know where it's going to take us, but not the whole technology from the world was as fast as the touch and writing on his skin, being close to him. Therefore, if we think about the social, the haptic sign language, the tactile sign language, there are many aspects to consider. The Nordic countries we have seen their theories, their concepts, and the haptic and the tactile um, communication. So we have the alphabet aspects, the finger spelling, the spelling on the hand. If the person tracks the hand and they understand in Brazilian Sign Language, haptic Brazilian Sign Language, where do they have the perception? We use the hapticism on the body, and also we have the sign language, the haptic sign language, thinking about the corrective. If the child is developing a sign language, we could use a hand above the other hand or underhand. Is the way that we use with deaf and blind people with multiple disabilities, multiple sensory disabilities. Um, Exercise for your side to see if you would be big. Because The text is a bit small, but I just bring some considerations for us to think about it. This material is very interesting. It's one that we have been studying and we would like to share with you guys today. So about the framework of sight that the person has. Now we have a blind person here. I just met him today. I was paying attention to the way that he communicates. You can see that his peripheral vision is working and his central vision is not working. So his mother is trying to use terminology, but I told her he's not Usher because Usher syndrome starts from the peripheral vision. So we start gathering knowledge, understanding what's happening to know how to work with them. So the deafblind person is the one that's going to help us evaluate their vision uh, framework and how we're going to work with his or her communication and also the tracking. These technologies are very interesting because when I was writing with Fernanda, we were discussing the Brazilian Sign Language, tactile Brazilian Sign Language. Some people like to grab to be touched in their hands or in their arms. And so these concepts that I've just detailed were very interesting for me. And also, I like to bring something that we have been discussing in our group, especially with the contribution of Ross and Rita, the parts of the body, the touch systems, and how the information is received and comprehended, and how you can work with that. So I remember when Eduardo Ruas, that is a guide interpreter, he's an amazing interpreter. He was in an emergency situation with Carlos Jorge, one of the other blind men who use tactile libras, Brazilian Sign Language. They were in another country, and they were he made an X in the skin to tell him it was an emergency because um, hail was happening there. So people that work with the blind, Fernanda, Lisa, other people that are researching here, they are in touch, and we have been learning from them too. Um, in the tactile sign language, we can see that the person has this perception in the coactive interaction. I have had some responses from people with multiple disabilities, and you can work with the peripheral or the central, and we start adjusting from their responses how to work with the with sign language as well. Some deaf and blind people use for example, for Brazilian Sign Language, we have some adjustments, some adaptations to think about the haptic aspects, the hand shapes, and also the possibilities that is the main word for us uh, of taking turns. When I stop and actively hear the deaf blind person and they hear me exchange information. So Jude Nicholas studies, he shows what is a bodily haptic sensation, how how our body works, the sensation first, then the perception, and finally the cognition. So it is what I feel, what I notice from that, and the apprehensions that I take from this movement, and then the understanding I take from this perceptions. So he also shows the body sensations, uh, what we feel from pain, from touch, from perception, what is pleasant, what is not. So when I was explaining the man that suffered the accident, so how do we test that and see the responses? Talking about the bodily haptic perception, is our group is also researching, because we keep discussing what are we going to interpret, to comprehend. So a means research, she talks about the baby. So how do we grab knowledge from this direction? And also to think, what are the movements, active movements, to identify what is an object, what is playing, how do I realize this is a doll? So we have three papers here with the same girl in different positions handling the doll to identify what object she's. Another example is when we have uh, deaf people use this a lot. They move forward and they go backward. So multiple disabilities, they touch with the feet. For example, there's a picture on the screen, and they move back. So sometimes when they're moving, they would use their feet or their hands to apprehend the world around. Also about how do you track the environment around you, and how do you navigate in this environment. I'd like to talk about how do we talk about interpretation, and um, so how do we understand the memory, the spatial perception, language, attention, and executive function. So this guy, my side here, well, he's the one studying the cognition, how we create this five meaning to think, how do we promote participation in tactile activities to improve their tactile cognition, people with deaf and blindness or multiple sensory disability, because there are many people working and they say, okay, I give a texture box, and I tell them, yeah, but for what? What is the, oh, so they can understand which one is big and which one is the small. But what is the purpose of that for real life? So I think 2 points, bullet points important for us is the social interaction, uh, for us to understand where does information come from. So when Fernanda said we need interaction to have literacy, so that's the point. How do people um, re- interact and share and build understanding? So uh, the haptic cognition, this group discuss uh, the interaction with mother and child. So I had the opportunity of, of seeing the interaction of a mom and a baby using tactile, uh, and the interaction and seeing this type of work. This would help the person, the two people, to connect, to have more respect, to uh, build knowledge together. So we think about the strategies, the stimulation, the perception, as I presented to you, and how do we explore that to move forward to literacy. So we have to encourage the tactile exploration. We need time. We need opportunity. You can see Anita, another a person from Netherlands. She works with the tactile. She showed if the child is tactile concerns, they will not let the child explore that. So also to leave spatial clues, and we start to create an environment that is able to move by themselves and understand where they are. Sometimes we could use the garden, well, if there are seeds, what is the process of a plant growing. So we uh, here it's Denise's student, and they've been working on how to read and learn how to read with Sharji. So this is an example. They have a very interesting research with comics, with charges, and this is one of the interesting parts. Also, the strategies on how we could work with association, fragmentation, repetition, and narrative memory. I thought a lot about our group, especially a lady that works with narratives, how they can recover an event through narrative.
Yeah, so your time is out. Please finish your speech. Yes, okay. So, one thing that we always said, how do we teach what is a tree for a deafblind? What is that? What does what do we do with that? So the person needs to explore that. Uh, in this slide, there is a whole wall of trees and grass, and the person needs to touch this wall and understand what it is. We have to create new strategies so this person can have contact with this object, with this thing. And that's it. Finish. Yes. So sorry. Okay. Does any of you guys have questions for our keynote speakers? If you're here, you can raise your hand. You can talk. I won't ask a lot from Marley because he is administrating 4 or 5 different screens and interpretations, so he may not be able to see. Do you have any question for the speakers? No? Anyone here? No? Well, since no one said anything, I'm going to ask you, Fernanda. You think about this as the language, expressive language, or the from the understanding and the producing. What is your theoretical framework, the one that you're using? I already read your book, but I want you to speak more about that. Okay, so every time we talk about deafblindness, we always talk about Vygotsky because we have to think about mediation. So we might think about Luria, or we need to think about who's talking about this general stuff. There are the concepts of Vygotsky, and there's the specific part. When we are going to pronounce English or foreign names, it's a little bit hard, but I forgot about the two authors that are going to talk about the reception and the expression. But what we have generally in the human body, then we apply to the deaf-blind person. One of them I remember, Rebecca Wilson and Catherine Stremmel. Those are the two authors that I forgot before. So we have to think about this step and the previous. And basically, is Vygotsky and Luria, those two have a lot of studies about the human development. I usually give this example. I don't have my bottle of water here, but it's there. I can see it. I use the water bottle a lot. Warley is bringing it to me. Thank you. I always use it because I always have a water bottle next to me. How will I understand the concept and talk the word water or bottle? I have to first understand the concept. So I understood that it is the bottle. Yes, but what is the meaning of bottle? It means that it it has the possibility or the capacity of putting liquids inside. So there are several concepts that I need to know. I have to understand what it is bottle, then I can understand that bottle is an object, it's not a food, it's not edible. And this one is plastic, but I can have a glass bottle, I can have an iron bottle, I can have aluminum bottle. I have to understand all those instances in order to understand what is happening and what it is water bottle. How can I ever understand what it is a water bottle if I don't understand what it is plastic, what it is water, a liquid? Uh, it could have juice, it could have soda, it could have uh, coffee. I don't know. Usually we put liquids. I can put other things inside a bottle, but usually we put liquids. So I have to get this sequence and be able to write the words water, bottle. There are a lot of things that we need to do. And that's why we use the word path to alphabetization, because it is a path. We need to get to understand and to trail each step of the way so we can go ahead and reach the other stages of development. I use the example plastic, glass, but everything is inside the same category bottle, but they are different because they have different materials. They are not the same thing. They have the same goal, which is put something inside.
Na verdade, cada resposta dá
Yeah,
uma nota
I
diferente,
think
né?
every answer gives
Respondeu sim, obrigado,
another
Fernanda.
thing to
E
think
agora eu tenho uma
about.
pergunta para Chile. Chile, uma das
And
palestras,
well,
né,
thanks,
que
Fernanda. I have other
agora
question
o
now for
tema Sul
Shirley.
Cegueira tem ganhado espaço e isso a gente fica muito feliz. Tem representatividade agora
I
na
see that the
Comissão
deaf
de Educação
blindness is gaining some
Inclusiva. Agora a gente já tem pessoas
space. We have
representando a comunidade
some
surdocega.
people
Faltou a
representing there
representatividade
at
no último plano, né,
uh,
de educação
the
especial, mas
secretaries
isso é uma
inside the
coisa
Ministry
que
of
eu acho que geraria uma
Education,
nova discussão, né, outro
and
assunto, uma nova
but
discussão.
this is
Mas eu queria que você
a
explicasse para a
theme for
gente, para
other
ficar mais
lecture.
claro, por que a
I
gente
just
chama
want
de
you to explain,
surdo-cegueira e
please,
não mais deficiência
why
múltipla?
it
E
is
por quê? Porque a gente
called
teve essa
deaf
discussão
blindness
lá
and
na hora
not
que a gente estava conversando com
multiple
os intérpretes,
disability.
né?
And
Vamos fazer sinal para deficiências múltiplas. Deficiência,
we also
surdez, cegueira,
we
várias.
were
Aí
thinking
a Chile
about
nos interpelou e
how
falou assim, não,
can
porque dá a
we
ideia de que a
use
gente
the
está
sign of
somando deficiências e essa não é. Isso não é o
multiple
conceito. Então eu queria só que você
disabilities.
falasse mais
We
um
were
pouquinho
thinking
sobre isso,
about
para ficar
doing the
mais claro para quem
signs
está no
of
outro.
disability
Na
plus
verdade,
deaf
a questão
plus
da
blind plus
surdo-cegueira,
and
ela
it's
teve
not a
todo
plus, it's
esse
other
passado,
concept,
né,
right?
de muitas
We don't we
terminologias.
can't
E
use
a
this
pessoa
kind of
surdo-cega
approach.
não é
Yes, that's
aceita nem
right,
como
because
surdo, nem como
uh,
cego, em
the
lugar
deaf
nenhum,
blind
porque
is
ninguém
different than the
aceitava.
deaf,
E,
and
na
it's different than
verdade, a
the
gente
blind,
ainda tem hoje
and
no
it's not the
Brasil
sum of both.
pessoas surdo-cegas que frequentam
We still
serviços
have
na área
deafblind
de
people that
cegueira, frequentam
goes
serviços na área
to
de surdez,
blindness
porque não se
services or
entende que ele é uma pessoa
deafness
só.
services
Então, quando veio o termo
because it can't
surdo-cegueira, tudo
it does
junto,
they
na verdade,
doesn't
quem propôs
understand
isso
that they
foi um
are a single
psicólogo que
person.
atendia na Itália. Ele trouxe
The
isso para
first
toda a
one that
comunidade
brought
da
this
DBI,
was a
né, lá em
psychologist that lives in
Orebro, em
Italy, in Italy.
1991, né, no
So
sentido de poder
it
pesquisar, e
said
esse
that
começou a
he said
trabalhar.
that
E
well,
aí
it's
se
not the
pensou,
sum
e realmente, se
of
você pensar
those,
na
it's
escrita em
other things.
português, surdo
And I
traço
think it's
cego,
true
que é o
because
correto, a gente não usa. A gente usa o surdo cego
we
para dar
use
entendimento com uma
deafblind
pessoa só.
without
E aí, quando
this
começa a
trace
trazer as
that
terminologias
we
que nem eu
usually
trouxe,
would
quem
put
traz o
between
multissensorial,
words,
no sentido de pensar que tem pessoas
because the hyphen
surdo-cegas que vão ter
because
outras questões, tanto de
we
saúde ou
understand that it's
outras
not the
deficiências,
composition of
né? Porque
those
aí a pessoa fala
conditions,
assim,
it's other
ah, ele
thing
é autista,
that's on
mas ele é um
purpose.
surdo-cego. Ele pode ter
And
um componente,
also
alguma
we
coisa,
can
ou ele
have
tem a
these
deficiência
different
intelectual, ou
things
ele tem
associated
a
like intellectual
tetraplegia, algumas,
disability
mas
or
ele é um
autism
surdo-cego.
or
E, na
other
verdade,
mobility
a
issues, but
interpretação do mundo, a gente tem muito pela
the,
visão e
thinking
audição.
about deaf
E
blindness,
que é
it
algo que essa
changes the
pessoa já vai ter
concept, the
barrado. E ele
understanding
vai
of
ter
the world.
mais necessidades em função das outras
This person
condições.
might
Então, alguns
have other
países,
necessities,
como
and
a
that's why some
Inglaterra,
countries
como
like
Portugal,
England
resolveu
or
usar
Portugal,
isso
they
como
decided to
multissensorial,
use
pensando
the
nessas questões,
multisensory
nessas
disability,
entradas e
thinking
nessas
about all the
pessoas que
differences
hoje
that
é um
deafblind
grande
people,
número e que a gente tem no
all the
Brasil, mas ninguém
differences
realmente estuda
that they
isso
present.
e você não sabe
In Brazil,
realmente
we
o
don't
que é.
have a lot of
Quando a
researchers
gente
about that.
trouxe a
And when
deficiência
we brought
múltipla
the
sensorial, é para não ficar só,
multisensory
ele é
disability,
deficiente
is
múltiplo. Não,
just
ele tem a visão, tem um
to
problema de visão
don't
que vai
think
fazer
about,
uma
oh, it's the
inferência
multiple
no
disability.
processo de
It's not
aprendizagem.
like
Ou ele
multiple
tem uma
disability
surdez que
in a
vai
huge
trazer
sack of
isso, né?
a lot of
A gente
different
começou a trazer
disabilities
esse
there
tema
that
da
are
deficiência
some.
sensorial junto com o pessoal
But
de
to
discussões da
think that it's
Itália, de
a
Portugal,
different
né,
kind
da
of things, and
Bélgica, e
in
também
getting along
começou a
with people
trazer
from
que o
Belgium,
que
from Italy,
influenciava no
from
processo
Germany,
de
that they were talking
aprendizagem
about
era
this in the
exatamente a
development
entrada de
part
informações,
of
né? Como que a gente
the
pensa em
deafblind
trazer essas
people.
informações? Então, na verdade, foi
And that
essas
was
questões que a
like
gente
an
tem, né? Por isso que eu
strategic
quis trazer aqui,
strategic
da gente pensar nesses conceitos. Eu acho que a gente, toda hora, a gente tem que
decision
retomar
so we
e
can
ver mesmo isso, né? Ou mesmo
comprehend it
quando era o
better and we
sinal
can
em
dialogue
Libras de
better
surdos
with all
cegos,
the
que era a
research that
questão
are
da audição e da visão. Isso
developed
também
in
é uma
this same
somatória.
perspective.
Quando foi feito esse sinal, foi pensando que é uma
The
única coisa,
deafblind
é
sign
um único movimento.
that
Mas a gente
we
respeita
created
porque tem
before, which
surdos
is
que
starting
primeiro
from
foram
the
surdos,
ear and
né?
ending
Ou
in
às vezes
the
a gente vê que
eye,
ainda tem pessoas
it
que
was like a
confundem,
first
por exemplo, a
approach,
pessoa
and some
nasceu
people
cega e
usually
depois ficou surda.
people
Ela é
sometimes get
surdo-cega,
confused
ou tem
because,
pessoas que
oh, it
estão
was
dizendo que ela é
deaf, but then
cego-surda.
it
Não
became
existe
blind,
isso, né?
and
Então,
oh,
elas
it
são
was born
surdo-cegas
blind,
porque
then
é
it
uma única
became
pessoa
deaf.
e ela vai precisar desse
But right
componente
now we
tátil
have
para
a
acessar o mundo,
broader
né? Na
spectrum,
verdade, o que ela vai
and
precisar é
people that
exatamente
have
desse
any kind of
tato ativo
impairment in some
para
or
poder
in
ter
both
toda a
of
interpretação e a
those
gente resgatar a
areas are
memória
considered
dela pelo
deafblind, and
tátil. O que ela
it
tinha de
have
visual, o que
this
ela
all
tinha de
this
auditivo,
the
a
common
gente está
thing about all
trazendo para
these
o
people
tátil para poder
is
trazer.
that
Não
they
sei se é isso te
approach
responde.
the
Perfeito, Chile,
world
com
and everything
certeza
that
me
happened
responde, me
through a
responde
tactile
muito.
way.
Pessoal, a gente está encerrando aqui a nossa
Well,
segunda mesa, né? A gente
so
teve a
we are
mesa de
finishing
abertura
our
com a nossa
second
professora. A gente está terminando aqui
conference.
agora.
We're
A gente
finishing it
volta à
right now.
tarde,
We'll be back
às 2h30,
afternoon
com uma
2:30
mesa muito especial
with
que
a
vai falar
very
sobre a comunicação
special
social
one
háptica,
talking about the
construção
social haptic
histórica.
communication, the
É uma
historic
mesa que vai ter a
construction.
Rita, o
We'll
Russ
have
e a
Rita,
Fernanda
Russ,
o Fernando com a Stephanie. Eles
Fernando,
escreveram
and
um livro
Stephanie.
contando, né, a
They wrote a
história
book
da Rita e do Russ, da
talking
construção da
about the
comunicação
story of
social
it, the
háptica
social
enquanto língua,
haptic
e eles vão
communication
trazer para a gente um pouco do que foi
history,
desenvolvido
and
nesse
they will
livro,
bring a little
nessa
bit of
mesa
what
muito especial. Então a
was
gente espera vocês às
used in this book. It's
14h30.
super
Gostaria
special.
de
We'll
agradecer
wait for
muito a
you at
Fernanda,
2:30.
agradecer muito a
I'd like to
professora
thank
Shirley, sempre
Fernanda and
enaltecer que a
Shirley,
professora Shirley, ela foi
and
precursora de tudo
always say
isso
that
que a
Shirley
gente está
was
falando
the
aqui. Então, se não fosse a professora
pioneer in
Shirley,
this.
esse seminário
If
não
wasn't Professor
existiria. Então,
Shirley,
eu
this
acho que
seminar
ela
wouldn't
merece uma salva de
exist.
palmas
So I
por tudo que
think
ela
she
já
deserves
fez.
a hand of applause, too.
E a gente se encontra aí no período da tarde. Tchau, tchau,
So
pessoal.
we'll meet each other in the afternoon. Bye, guys.